Liberal Currents presents Half the Answer with your hosts, Caitlin M. Green and Trent R. Nelson.
Well, happy days are here again. You know that understanding a question is half of an answer, and this is, of course, Half the Answer with Trent R. Nelson. And, of course, we have Caitlin M. Green with us as well, co-host. And, well, what doesn't she do? She's an editor, she's a linguist, she's boogieing all over writing and yelling about stuff. It's a good deal. Well, we do it together. Caitlin, you've had a little time off from having to choose guests, find wonderful folks to come and hang out with us, but who have you brought with you today?
That's true. You might think I got lazy, but that's not true. I have brought a banger again. Today we have Maureen Kosse. She holds a PhD in linguistics from the University of Colorado Boulder, and she's on her way to her next gig, a postdoc position in women's gender and sexuality studies at Penn State.
Yes.
Where she'll be working on the seminar series called Birthing the Nation, which discusses gender, sex, and reproduction in ethno-nationalist imaginaries. And I've been a big fan going way back, and we've done some conferences together, and it's been a really good time. So hi, Maureen, how are you?
Hi, Caitlin. It's great to see you again. Trent, it's great to see you for the first time. I'm doing well. Very excited to have employment coming up.
And you're going to be moving, huh?
Yep. This is going to be the first time I have lived outside of Colorado.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Big moves. And it's not even close. You're going all the way across the country.
All the way to State College.
Well, Maureen and Caitlin, what are we going to be discussing?
Oh boy, we're going to get uncomfortable. It's time to talk about cucks and cucking and how everything is cuck anxiety. So a while back, I went to a talk by Maureen where she presented her paper that's called Ted Cruz Cucks Again, which is about the semiotics of the word cuck and like how it gets used in the alt-right space. And so I was obviously that stuck with me for a while because here we are talking about it today. But because every time something comes up that's about like politics and sexual like anxieties and masculine like control over the female body or control over each other, like it is. And like Maureen, you were telling me before we started recording, like, gosh, I was really hoping it wouldn't just like always be everywhere forever, but it is. So here we are. So Maureen, could you start us off by talking about that paper a little bit?
Yes. So as Caitlin already said, the title is Ted Cruz Cucks Again. And I started to get interested in the word cuck around 2015. For those of you who've been tracking like large internet social blow-ups, this was right around the time of Gamergate. And I was just beginning my PhD at CU Boulder. This was actually right before. And I was already very interested in what we now call the manosphere. I've always been kind of creeping on incel subreddits and incel forums. And I also would kind of creep around on like the pickup artist sort of area of the internet. And that's what led me to the alt-right. Because at that time, there was all of this chatter going on in these spaces about a sort of newer movement, a more kind of edgy and exciting political reactionary movement. And so I started lurking there too. Mm-hmm. And one of the first things I noticed was, aside from kind of the typical hallmarks of the alt-right, very meme heavy, very kind of cavalier language towards serious topics, I kept seeing this word cuck come up. And I was somebody who previously wanted to study medieval linguistics. And so I recognized cuckold, like cuck being from cuckold. And I was like, this is just bizarre to be, also because I had never seen cuck in a shortened form before.
Sure.
And so
it really was new at that point to say just cuck and not cuckold. And also for it to be something that like non-medieval interested people would talk about.
Yeah, really though. And like, I mean, there are some pop culture moments, like Andy from The Office calls himself a cuckold at one point.
Oh yeah.
But
But that's
that's
like part of his character as a guy who's like kind of full of himself, right? And like
right.
went to an elite school and is like just sort of he just talks funny. And so when he
Exactly.
says cuckold, it's
Right.
kind of part of that, right?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so then I see, like, I think the most common thing we're used to is people in the alt-right and manosphere going cuck, 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 you're a cuck, whatever. But
Mhm.
what was really interesting to me as a linguist was seeing cuck used as a verb,
Mhm.
because for those of us who maybe aren't so familiar, generally speaking, nouns refer to concepts or entities, whereas verbs describe events.
Mhm.
And they have, we have these kind of built-in structures of how events are supposed to unfold. And
Mhm.
so when people were saying things like, Ted Cruz cucks again, or I hope Trump doesn't cuck on Israel, for
Mhm.
example, I was like, what does cuck on mean? Like, what does it mean to cuck
Yeah.
on somebody or something?
Right.
And looking into it a little bit more, as we're probably going to get into,
Mhm.
it became clear that the verb use of cuck had a really strong correlation with the imagery of cuck pornography,
Mhm.
which is actually where we see that first instance of the clipped version of cuck.
Nice.
And so, the paper is about how the way that cuck is used in the alt-right is very informed by the logic of pornography, and especially like
Yeah.
the cuck genre of pornography.
Sure. So today, cucking is in the news again, right? So we have two major stories that have happened in the last month or so. One is Kanye West's album, which is the album called Cuck? The album's called Cuck, right? There was a lot of back and forth about what it was going to be called. But it
Bully.
has Bully. It's called Bully. Oh my gosh.
Bully.
See, like so much. But there's a song called Cuck, and there's like a song. This is so weird. But anyway, there's a song that's called
I'm
Heil
sorry.
Hitler.
I'm sorry. Cuck is an
Help.
upcoming album from
Yes.
Kanye West. Bully
But
is
there's a
a
lot of songs
previous.
available. They're being like dropped out, and they're all weird and
I mean,
bad.
the album cover is insane. Can I just say it's
Yeah.
like a Klansman like kissing the back of another Klansman, like holding him in some romantic way in front of what appears to be like hey. Very, very peculiar. I don't know
You
what
can
is
help us
going
with this,
on in this
Maureen. What's happening?
subgenre, Maureen. I don't understand what's going on in this remix of
Yeah.
cuckoldry and also hate.
Oh, wait. So it's the red guy. Sorry. It's a guy in a red hood and a guy in a white hood, and they're doing like a prom pose, like
Yeah.
kissing the back of the neck, and then there's hay bales behind them. And those are different types of clan
Yeah.
Yeah. To
robes, right? They're not
right.
always white. Sometimes they are red. Okay, so we'll just get out of ahead of yeah. There's a song. It was going to be called World War III. And then it was called Bully. And there's a song on it called Heil Hitler, in which he talks about how he likes to get cucked, right? And by cucked, we mean this is a fetish participation thing. This is like you are in a room and your partner is having sex with someone else, or maybe you're right outside the door, but you're supposed to know about it, right? And you're happy about it. And it's like you're part of the fun. That's how I understand like the cuck fetish to be, right? And
Yes.
so that's what's in his song is he likes it, he thinks it's great, whatever. But it's also embedded in this song that's called Heil Hitler, where the chorus is Heil Hitler, right? He has released a clean version. It's called Hallelujah, and he just sings Hallelujah instead, which that you could unpack for another hour, right?
Yeah, that's a lot.
But what we know about Kanye West or Ye is that he's been hanging out with like Nick Fuentes. Um, is that who he's been hanging out with?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's been hanging out with Nick Fuentes, who's an old alt-right figure. I say old, he's in like his mid-20s, but he's been in the alt-right for a while. And he's been meeting with Trump. He's like a MAGA guy. A while back, he pulled a stunt where he took all the merch off of his website except for a t-shirt that had a swastika on it. That was like the only thing you could buy on his merch site. So like he's been flirting with Nazi imagery. He's been talking about Hitler in a positive way, where he's like, well, I love everybody because I'm a Christian, which means I love Hitler, but then also Hitler was right. So that goes a little further than just being than just Christian charity, right?
Right.
So yeah, that's one way that Cuck is in the news right now. Another way is Stephen Miller, who works in the Trump administration. And what's his role right now? Everyone's always moving, right? White House advisor.
Person in the
Worst
world.
person in a crowded field with a lot of competition. Yeah, White House advisor. He's got a wife. The wife is moving over to work for Elon Musk.
Katie Miller.
She has been affiliated with Musk for a while, right? But then somebody, a Blue Sky user, Gwen Snyder, wrote, "Oh, I am not shitposting, folks. Stephen Miller, his wife, and Elon are widely rumored to be a throuple. Now Miller's wife is leaving the Trump team to be with Musk, and literally per the New York Times, Stephen is angrily subtweeting Musk. They actually put it in the paper of record that he was mad." So then everybody went kind of nuts, and they were like, "Oh my God, obviously Stephen Miller is getting cucked by Elon Musk." And that became like a big meme for maybe it still is. Honestly, I think it still is going on. So we got cucking in the news, right? So I thought, why don't we start from the beginning and do a brief history of cuck? And so we're gonna start. We will not start in medieval times, although Maureen, as you said, that is where cuckoldry really became established as a cultural object, right? But we're going to start into 2014. So on August 15th, 2014, a young man named Aaron Joni accused his girlfriend of cheating on him in a blog post. Now, this person was Zoe Quinn, who is a non-binary person. So the term girlfriend and female and woman are all references to the ways that they were treated by the people consuming this information, right? Not about their actual personhood. So Joni accused his girlfriend of cheating on him in a blog post. Actually, first he tried doing it on some gaming forums, but his posts were deleted and he got kicked out of them because that's a weird thing to post in gaming forums. Then he went to WordPress. He knew his girlfriend, as a female game developer, was already the target of a disturbing amount of harassment on sites like 4chan and Reddit. He also knew that accusations of infidelity would send them into a rage because they were already these kind of men's rights kind of guys, the kind of guys we would call manosphere now. And they were obsessed with that kind of thing. So he kickstarted a harassment campaign that would balloon so far out of control that the event would quickly come to be known as Gamergate. During the ensuing melee, Aaron got his feelings hurt a little too because people kept calling him a beta cuck.
There you go.
Because what did he do? He went on the internet and he said, "My partner is not faithful. And what's going to happen to you if you admit that? The dudes are going to roast you." So yeah, that's kind of what happened, I think. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
More or less.
Turns out dudes aren't nice. I don't know what he was expecting.
And let's shed our tears now because they're going to dry up really soon, right? Because what was Gamergate? It was not a movement of dudes making fun of this guy for getting cheated on. No,
Right.
It was a bunch of people spending a lot of time and energy making a few women's lives hell for the crime of being women. So yeah, that's the real headline of Gamergate, not that this guy got sad. Cuck or cuckold was a word we used to never really run into outside of a Shakespeare play or a porn site. It was an old-timey word that meant a man whose wife had cheated on him. The term comes from the cuckoo bird, which lays its egg in another bird's nest so that the chick will be raised and fed by the host bird. By 2014, a certain kind of guy was using it all the time as an insult against guys who thought women should have rights or that people of color are not all monsters. So one famous example is that we had Louis C.K., who at the time was not canceled. It's 2014, remember, cast your minds back. And somebody on 4chan wrote, all white women should try the BBC and fill their wombs with superior POC seed. So that's a fun one. So what is BBC?
Big black cock.
Thank you, Maureen. The way the air went out of you.
Yeah.
Yep. And then POC is obviously person of color. So basically what they're saying is this is what Louis C.K. thinks, is that all white women should sleep with brown people, and they should race mix and make babies that are mixed, right? So then someone else said, what does the CK stand for anyways in Louis C.K., right? And then the next answer is Cuck King. And he really did come to be known in those circles as Louis Cuck King for a while, because I was a fan of his stand-up around that time. I remember he was like one of the dude stand-ups who like wasn't overtly sexist and racist in his stand-up, right? And that is unacceptable to the 4chan users.
Yeah.
So in the ensuing year, the word would break containment from the forums, entering the lexicon of guys who almost certainly did not know what a chan was. And if you, dear listener, do not know what a chan is, count yourself lucky and don't worry. Don't Google it. So around this time on sites like Breitbart, you could read about how if your girl is on the pill, quote, you're probably getting cucked because birth control makes you a slut. With uses like this, we're dealing with something like a personal insecurity, right? The worry that your actual girlfriend is cheating. And so that's kind of where the idea of cuck, maybe that's like the smallest circle of cuck, is that like you're a guy and you're just worried that you're going to get cheated on, because that's just an insecurity people have, right?
Yeah.
So in June 2015, so we're now almost a year after the start of the Gamergate stuff, Donald Trump rode down that golden escalator to announce his candidacy for president of the United States. And the very next month, he showed up at the Family Leadership Summit in Iowa and said about his opponent, John McCain, I like people that weren't captured, okay? Which is a thing you could say about a prisoner of war, but I wouldn't recommend it personally. Some felt that that level of disrespect for a Purple Heart veteran was a campaign killer, but right-wing radio personality Rush Limbaugh knew better. On his show, Rush said, if Trump were your average, ordinary, cuckolded Republican, he would have apologized by now, and he would have begged for forgiveness, and he would have gone away. And the establishment would have claimed another scalp, claiming they had protected the sanctity of campaigns. But Trump's not playing by those rules. He's doubling down. Now he's giving out Lindsey Graham's telephone number and talking about how much fun it is. He said, why should I care about Lindsey Graham? Have you seen what he is in the polls? It's 0, folks. Why should I defer to somebody that's got 0? Rush goes on, the American people have not seen this in a while. They haven't seen this kind of braggadocio that's done in a way that's fun. Trump's braggadocio is not off-putting except to its victims. So here we've got cuckolded in its full form, right? We don't have like just cuck. But I think it is probably one of the times when the phrase cuckold is kind of broadcast to a very wide audience, right?
Yeah.
People who listen to Rush Limbaugh, which was unfortunately a lot of
many
people.
many people.
So here, what is
I
he
grew up
saying
with
when he calls
just-
Republicans cuckolded, like normal Republicans? He's saying like those are people who apologize.
Yeah, like there's this, especially in the more fringe parts of the far right, but I mean, come on, this is like now I think a more mainstream opinion, but at that time there was a large conflict between your kind of more fringy right wingers and who were really mad at your more kind of neoliberal conservative types who seemed to capitulate to identity politics. You know, they hated people like Colin Powell. They hated people like Jeb Bush was a huge target of their ire during the 2015 Republican. What's the It's not the
The
prelims.
primaries.
Primaries. Thank you.
Yeah.
The prelims.
The prelims. You are very grad school embedded, I feel.
Yeah, right. Graduate
All their
student
preliminary
coded.
exams, and then they submitted a presidential proposal, and then yeah. Yeah, so that sounds about right. I mean, Jeb, he was a little soft anyway, right? He wasn't terribly energetic, and he was bilingual in English and Spanish, which feels like a kind of a race traitor in their heads, probably.
Yeah.
So yeah, he'd be a natural target, right, for being called a cuck. In this case, yeah, it's like, oh, he said, like, Trump said something completely out of line. If he were cuckolded, right, if he were like a normal Republican, he would have said sorry, but he didn't. Instead, he doubled down and gave out Lindsey Graham's phone number.
Well,
Another person whose masculinity got really trashed, right?
right. Well, I mean, I think that there is something contiguous about this movement insofar as the cucked Republicans are the
Mhm.
Republicans who, at some point across the last 60 years, acquiesced to New Deal politics, to New
Mhm.
Deal, and then eventually to Medicaid and to the civil rights, right, and to, as Maureen and Caitlin noted, right, to identity politics to some degree. And these are all cucked. Not getting rid of the welfare state is
Yeah,
cucked.
that's
And
cucked. Yeah.
and so this is really not new. It's just this group has been lying underneath the mud for 50, 60, 70 years. And
Yeah,
now they're back trying to cuck us,
wiggling
Maureen.
to the surface. You know what's so funny is also right about when that episode came out where Rush Limbaugh said the thing about being a cuckolded Republican is also when New York Magazine put out a story about a man in an open marriage, and like they really freaked out about that too, including Rush Limbaugh, where they were like, "Oh my God, the liberals want you to think cucking is natural and fine." So like that sort of joined in with the conversation about these cuckolded Republicans who adhere to norms and who think that equality is a good idea, and then these guys that are like just like lib dudes who think it's cool to have their wife sleep around, right?
Yeah.
So they were really freaking out. So also that same week, the hashtag cuckservative started trending on Twitter, which in linguistics that would be a blend. That's a fun semantic change term for you guys. That's where you take first you take cuckold and you clip off the old, and now it's cuck, and then you blend it into conservative, and now it's cuckservative. So that hashtag started trending on Twitter, RIP Twitter. I don't miss you that much. And yeah, and a slew of explainers and opinion pieces showed up to debate whether the term was just a criticism of weak sellout conservatives or if it was racially charged, if it was a racial term or not. We know what we think, but let's read on. Those on the racially charged side pointed out that while a cuckold can refer to any man whose partner has had sex with another man, a large proportion of cuckold pornography specifically involves a white wife and a black sex partner. And even some conservative pundits like Eric Erickson and Matt Lewis worried that the term might catch on among those who didn't know that it had come out of those white nationalist forums. Like maybe they just heard Rush Limbaugh say it and they didn't realize like the other history that it had. For Steve Bannon's website, Breitbart, Milo Yiannopoulos penned a denial of the idea that cuckservative was even racist at all, because, of course, cuck porn doesn't have to include interracial sex. It is a laughable attempt at defending the term, not least because in the second paragraph, he links to this checklist on a website called Return of Kings, which we already know is a white nationalist website. And it's called 10 Signs You Might Be a Cuckservative. And it defines cuckservatives as the kind of conservative who enjoys watching your nation get brutally gang raped by cultural Marxists. So what's a cultural Marxist?
Oh, well.
We brought our resident expert in to tell us all about it.
So cultural Marxism taps into a very old reactionary idea. It's also called sometimes cultural Bolshevism, but this idea that the original intention of Karl Marx was to overthrow society, and therefore anyone who is on the left, anyone who is liberal, anyone who cares about the rights of other people as part of this larger sinister movement to superficially, or not superficially, but like basically supplant the real culture of white people with the culture of Jews. And so in
Right.
this case, cultural Marxism is sort of dog whistle for Jewishness.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you hear cultural Marxists, you gotta know that that's what it is. Also, when you hear like globalists, that's a lot
Right.
of times what people are referring to, right? Is this like there's this idea of Jewish people as like not really belonging anywhere. And so they're just like international and they maintain these like spooky networks, right?
Right.
Where they're manipulating world affairs to their own benefit. And one of the ways that they're accused of doing that is encouraging immigration of brown people into white countries where they will sort of pillage and rape and murder and create sort of chaos in that country. And then question mark, the Jews profit. I don't know, but that's the conspiracy, right?
Right.
Yep.
And liberal culture, liberal society is actually a part of that Marxist scheme. It's a slippery slope to Marxism because
Yeah,
they
that's how we
conceive
get there.
of white culture to have some type of, I mean, they're all kind of Yarvinist in this way, where they're
Mhm.
like secret monarchists.
Yeah. Oh, we'll get to Yarvin.
Yeah, well, how could we not?
Yeah. So let's talk about that checklist. How to know if you're a conservative, right? So some of those items are great. They are things like letting Mexicans into the country, pandering, this is their word, pandering, to Black voters by cozying up to Black leaders, something you alluded to, Maureen, blaming unions for the fall of Detroit instead of who really done it, which is Black people. So if you're like, oh yeah, like conservatives, they hate unions, obviously. And so to do the natural conservative thing, which is to say Detroit's in a bad place because of unions, that makes you a conservative because you should say Detroit's in a bad place because of all the Black people. um, it's also makes you a conservative if you are pro corporation, because corporations are woke. So that if you like corporations, then you're woke too, and you're a conservative. They weren't even using the phrase woke at this time, but that's my interjection. Uh, respecting military service members, even if they're a loser like John McCain, that got on the list. That was its own thing of the 10 things that might make you a conservative. And then also apologizing. So yeah, I don't think you can really get away from the allegation that it's a racial term, that cuck is like it's pretty racialized, right? It has to do
Yeah.
with like a beautiful white thing getting fucked by an ugly black or brown thing. Um, Neo-Nazi Richard Spencer famously said, the conservative meme doesn't make sense without race, like from the horse's mouth, right? The alt-right, who instigated the use of cuck as a political insult, definitely know how racist it is. One blogger describes it this way. Very basically, the conservative is a white Gentile conservative or libertarian who thinks he's promoting his own interests, but really isn't. In fact, the conservative is an extreme universalist and seems often to suffer from ethnomasochism and pathological altruism. In short, a conservative is a white, non Jewish conservative who isn't racially aware. So I think that does put it to bed, doesn't it?
With
Um,
racially aware meaning involved in white politics, I'm assuming. Like
Yes,
white,
white
yeah.
identity politics, white nationalism, right? Yeah.
Right.
Not yeah, when he says not racially aware, he means racist. Um, aware of the way that everyone who's not white is bad. And is hurting you and your family and your nation, right? So the relationship between cucking, being cucked, and American politics was outlined by white nationalist Kevin Deanna on his blog American Renaissance, in which he paints a picture of 2015 in which the left is the instigator of a culture war against implicit symbols of white identity. Okay, so what that means, correct me if I'm wrong, is he's saying we were trucking along, living our life, being whites, being proud, and then the left decided that that was wrong, and they went after what statues, flags, probably like the the bars and stars.
Yep.
So that's like an unprompted attack that the left did against us for the crime of simply being white and knowing that we're white. Cool. Deanna, it would later be revealed, had been meeting with Peter Thiel to consult on Trump's 2016 campaign. So like normally I would say like this is a rock and it's got creepy crawlies under it and we shouldn't pull up the rock, right? But we're living in a world where the creepy crawlies under the rock are helping shape our current government.
Yeah.
So we got to look, right? We got to look at the creepy crawlies.
Yes.
I'm not happy about it. So to
I know
Deanna,
Peter Thiel's going to be under that rock. I know he's going to be under that rock. He's always under the rock.
He's under every rock. He's under every single rock. We're going to lift
he
up
owns
rocks.
the rocks.
It's going to be Thiel. It's going to be Andreessen. There's bad stuff under those rocks. So yeah, to Deanna, the reality for racially conscious whites in 2015 is that they had been working to put Republicans in power. Then the Republicans are now controlling Congress, and they're still letting Obama do what he wants on immigration, housing discrimination, and law enforcement, which I guess they mean reforms, like police reform.
Yeah.
And they're still not able to like stop him, right? So in the eyes of the white nationalists, the Republicans that they elected are not doing enough to stop the incursion of non-white people into our country and, importantly, our suburbs. They talk about suburbs a lot. The white nationalists are feeling, quote, deceived, cheated, and exploited, which Deanna says, is identical to being cucked. And this is where I think we have a little bit of like semantic broadening or something happening with cucked, right? Because in the beginning of this paragraph, we were at like, you're a cuck if you're a right winger who's watching America get fucked, right? But now you're the one getting fucked, right? Because you're being cheated and exploited. And so I think here we get kind of a blurring of cuckoldry and also just like general homophobia and like the idea that getting fucked is bad, right?
Yeah.
And just like all the sexual metaphors that they can think of kind of in one. Do you think that's right?
Yeah. My personal belief, especially with this broadening of cuck and this sort of, it never loses its racialized character, in my opinion, but like there are places where cuck is not so obviously racialized, especially for people seeing it the first time. And what you were saying makes me think of an argument that I make, which is that what's so perfect about cuck is it takes advantage and leverages sexual insecurity of white men. And we're seeing this, we see all these people hand wringing about the gender divide and like, Gen Z girls aren't dating conservatives, etc.
Right.
So they're taking all this sexual insecurity and infusing it with racialization. And so that insecurity becomes the gateway to this kind of red pilling moment where all of these truths about race are revealed. Because for whatever reason, this sexual insecurity is the perfect gateway, I think, through which to recruit people.
I mean, it's such like a tender part of you, your insecurities. And it is so sensitive. And so if somebody like pokes at your insecurities, it is easy, right, to manipulate them. I have been talking a big game about how I want to do a whole thing about Back to the Future and how the Back to the Future trilogy explains America. But one of the ways in which that functions is that anytime somebody calls Marty McFly a chicken, he does whatever they were suggesting, right? Yeah. And that's exactly what it is they're playing to his insecurity because he's never been kind of a tough guy, right? And he's been bullied. And so he's just thinking about like, oh God, if they think I'm a chicken, then I'm not like a proper dude and I'm going to fail and everything's going to fall apart for me. And of course, spoiler alert for Back to the Future 2, but that is kind of his downfall, right? Same for us as a society. So I think it's fun to look into kind of the contradictions in who's cucked and who's not when you look into these like alt-right things. So if you look at Breitbart, as I don't recommend that you do, you're going to find a lot of things written by Milo Yiannopoulos, who's trying to rebrand as like a Christian ex-gay far-righter right now. He's got a book coming out. We'll talk about it later.
He was Kanye West's. He was his like right hand for a while.
Oh, yeah, he's who like parlayed the introduction to the other far righters, right?
Yeah.
Good times. Okay,
Interesting.
so he in 2016 published a couple of articles about this time when a delegation of conservatives, they were all like representatives of presidential nominees, they went to Facebook to try to pressure Mark Zuckerberg into not silencing conservative views, because there was this whole thing in 2016, and there still is, right, of social media is censoring the right wing and they're promoting the left wing. And when you actually look at it, it's like, no, strike that, reverse it, like total opposite, right? But there was this whole thing. It was this like victimhood thing that they were doing. So the first one was called "Don't Be a Cuck, Zuck, Accept My Debate Challenge," where he says Zuck is meeting with cucks. So he's saying, oh, if you go to that Zuckerberg meeting, like you are a cuck. Because you're like going to the corporate overlord to like beg for your scraps. And he said, aside from the Trump representative who can scarcely avoid the meeting if he wants to hold the social network to its promises come the general election, the conservative representatives are primarily members of the establishment, with a capital E, so he means it. He goes on to boast that Breitbart won't be showing up to the meeting, even though Facebook reached out to us. So obviously, like, not going is the non-cucked option, except for this little carve out that he gives us for Trump, right? Where he's like, well, I mean, Trump had to send somebody because how else was he going to get his goals met? Duh, he's a go-getter. He's a deal maker. He needs to send a representative. But everyone else who sent a representative, you're cucks. And then the next day after the event, he wrote, I'm not sure, but I can't remember the last time it was an honor to be invited as window dressing by a corporation's public relations department, cucked by Zuck. How embarrassing. So again, just showing up means you're cucked already, except for Trump.
Of course.
So he says it again. He's like, the only really non-cucked member of the delegation today was Trump staffer Barry Bennett. But of course, the Republican frontrunner had to send someone. And of course, Facebook had no option to reach out to them.
It's pathetic.
So, yeah, it is pathetic. And honestly, if I could think of a word for it, it might be cucked. Like, Milo, please get off of Trump. Oh my gosh.
Everyone's cucked except my very special boy, my daddy, who I love so much.
I'll do anything for him, and I hope he notices me. Yeah. A little senpai action. So at this point, I feel like cuck is still a word mostly only spoken and heard by the far right. And I have another one, which is in your grammatical structure, right? So we have cuck as a verb, finally. So it's 2016, December 27th. Bill Mitchell says, for whatever reason, the term alt-right has been poisoned. As Trump himself has done, you are better to leave it behind. Hashtag America first. So he's advocating for like a branding shift, right? The same people who are alt-right, he would like them to move over to America first. And Richard Spencer replies, and he says, 1, people like Bill Mitchell were never hashtag alt-right. They are conservative Inc., backbenchers who hopped on the Trump train. And then 2, they've never even thought about race and identity, not to mention Jewish influence and activism and geopolitics. And then 3, I guarantee they will cuck on real immigration restriction. So finally, we have our verb. It is cuck on. And so in that case, the on is like on the subject of, right? So they're going to cuck when it comes to immigration restriction.
Exactly.
And so this is where we have that idea again of like, there are these establishment conservatives that just don't have the balls to stop the brown people from invading our country. And that makes them cucks. And I think, oh yeah, go ahead.
They're cucked, and them being cucked is in fact them being fucked in the sense of being degraded in some sense. That's how this sort of flows from, as you were noting before, Caitlin, this sort of like amorphous, like we're cucked here, this is cuck, this is being cucked, everything is cucked. It's this sort of, when America is getting cucked, you're also getting fucked because you're
Yeah.
America and America's being cucked. So you're being fucked in the cucking
Oh
of
my God.
America. Yeah,
My brain.
it's fucked up, and this
So
will be a fun episode.
I also think that they're sort of imagining themselves as like America's husband, right?
Yes.
Because it's like it's your girl getting fucked, America. That's your girl.
Yes.
And I think, like, you know, we love to kind of portray countries as women, right? And it's not always like an evil thing to do.
Colombia,
So
Britannia.
yeah, like exactly, Columbia, Lady Liberty, right? Like we have a lot of these sort of female metaphors that are like a woman that takes care of the country, but also is the country and represents some quality of the country that we like. Um, and for America, obviously she's white. Um, you know, I was a Baltic Studies kid in college, and there's a strong tradition of representing Latvia as a blonde woman. Um, and you know, there's some really powerful art that's been done for that. It's pretty sad that I'm more familiar with the Latvian stuff than the American stuff, but we won't worry about that. But I took a lot of classes on it, right? But like, there's a really popular animated film that's based on a 19th century play that's about like this girl who is kidnapped by sort of demons and has to be rescued. And the medium by which she is rescued is music, because that's like Latvia's whole thing. And she represents Latvia being invaded by the Germans. Like, you know, that's just sort of like a way that you would represent your country being invaded, is like a woman being kidnapped.
Europe itself, Europa.
Hmm.
You know, from the Greek story, right? That's how we
Yeah.
get the term. It's all, and in, as you noted, Caitlin, many times it's in good fun or good nature. There's nothing necessarily negative about it, but it does lead us to the ability to be cucked as a nation, right?
Yeah, it gives us that leeway into, or that pathway into the metaphor, right? And you know, it's not an accident that there's a white supremacist group called Identity Europa, right?
Yeah.
Like, of course.
I think another element of the alt-right take on it too is that the woman, and also by extension the black bull and things like that, are too stupid to know what's good for them. Like that's a
Yes,
huge part of that.
it's like paternalism. Yeah.
So like cucking on is actually failing this huge moral imperative to basically protect the country from itself, because they have all these manosphere ideas that all white women want to do is, you know, they want to find the guy with the most money and the biggest dick, and they're just so stupid that like they'll do things that are bad for whiteness. They have a very special contempt for white women who have sex with black and brown men.
Yeah.
And so I
I've
just
seen a
wanted to add
lot
that
of
level
those
in.
like those incel cartoons about like the Stacy and the Becky and the Tyrone, you know, where the idea is they, you know, they draw these images of sort of like archetypes, right? And so it's this like white woman, and she's kind of distracted by the short-term fun of getting with this black guy who's like very sexy. And they are just like animals, right? They're just like attracted to each other, and they're just doing what animals do. Meanwhile, there's this like good guy incel who would have supported her and given her lots of lovely white babies, and they would have had a house in the suburbs if only she hadn't been so short-sighted, right? So yeah, it's this idea that white women and brown men and black men have to be controlled for their own good and for the good of the nation.
But it's amazing how holding this view, right, it can be snuck into mainstream society that they are actually the ones who are seeking to protect women, right, and not subjugate them in various terrible ways.
And that was the intent behind like Birth of a Nation, right? Where
Right.
that's like the classic example of a white female who's trying to be virtuous, but she's just overtaken by these like forces, this dark, scary guy that chases her down, right?
And that interacts with the anti-trans panic too, for the same reasons.
Yeah,
Right.
it is absolutely related. So April 2017, Just a few months into Trump's first term, the Daily Beast reported that Steve Bannon and Jared Kushner were constantly getting in fights, and that Bannon called Kushner a cuck and a globalist. So we've already covered how cuck and globalist are both kind of related to this like anti-Jewish conspiracy, right?
Right.
And that headline got the late night TV crowd hooting and hollering when Stephen Colbert brought it up that week. So let's roll the clip.
Because there is known friction between these two. Because whenever Kushner's not around, Bannon calls him a cuck. And Bannon tried to stop the demotion, threatening at one point to quit if it went forward. Wait a second. Steve Bannon, you threatened to quit if you got kicked off the National Security Council? Then you got kicked off and you didn't quit? That's a TCM, bro.
Total cock move.
They loved it. They loved it so much. So yeah, Colbert gave us the classic Colbert flair where he turned it into like a graphic and did the eyebrow and everything. And at this point, I guess like your mom knows what a cuck is, right? Like, you know, sort of kitchen table TV watchers, like TV dinner couch people are all like, oh yeah, cucks. I know about those, which is wild to me.
If people like, I have a friend who's a park ranger, and he like works with like this 18-year-old girl who called someone a cuck out of nowhere, and he asked her what it meant, and she was like, I don't actually know.
Like asshole or something.
Yeah, it's just like it's just now like integrated into the cultural lexicon, even for people who are offline. It's bonkers.
Yeah. So I think the far right was pretty excited about that, honestly. I think it gave them a little energy. You know, there was a New Yorker article about the alt-right, a lot of like profiles, because people were suddenly very curious about the alt-right. You know, they had done this, they had done like Unite the Right. Like people were just like, what is this? So Richard Spencer posted the New Yorker article about like dating and sex and alt-right guys, and he captioned it, once you go alt-right, you'll never cuck again, which that just sounds sinister to me, right? Like that feels like you get involved with an alt-right guy and he's gonna like keep you under lock and key.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And it's like a stupid sounding inversion of once you go black, you never go back.
You're right. Oh no. Yeah. It's always race. It's always, I mean, it's Richard Spencer. So for him, race is like front and center. So he's always going to be like, and also the Jewish thing, like, and also the blacks. So like, he's easy. You can always tell what he's up to. So I don't know if this is right, but the way I was looking at like how cuck got used among people who might like reasonably hear it, it kind of ebbs and flows with the presidential elections. At like as Trump is starting to run again, then you get more conversations about who's a cuck and who's cucking, and who's getting cucked, I guess. And then, you know, at once he's like fully entrenched in his presidency, or once Biden is fully entrenched in his presidency, then that sort of it like recedes out like the tide. So then I think 2019 is another sort of uptick, right? And so I've got another clip for, this is from InfoWars, which created a like joke product that you could buy on their website. So let's roll that clip.
InfoWars presents Real Stable Genius.
Real stable genius.
Today we salute you, Mr. Climate Change Activist.
Mr. Climate Change Activist.
You tirelessly and fearlessly warn the world how the world is ending without a single pause to do any research.
No time to study.
50 years, 10 years, 10 months, 10 minutes. I'm surprised this commercial is still running.
It's all over.
You'll chain yourself to anything just to stop a cow fart. Climb a tower to fight the power. Superglue your tit to the street to stop the heat.
I lost my nipple.
So crack open an ice cold cuck light, Mr. Climate Change Activist. After all, it's the last day on Earth.
It's my moment in the sun.
Cuck Light, InfoWarsStore.com, Austin, Texas.
Now, I don't know if it was like part of the joke to have a guy that could not sing or if that's just like the best singer they could get.
It's gay to
So
sing
that's what
well.
they got. Yeah, it is gay to sing well, you're right.
It was part of the joke because that was the commercial that
Because
they're
he's supposed to be on board with like the climate change activists, right?
well
Okay.
the commercial that they're parodying also has like a goofy guy singing things like that. So it's on it
See,
Oh.
here's
yeah.
the historical context that we needed. Was this a Bud Light ad that they were
Yes.
like parodying?
I
Okay.
believe so.
So I think there's a lot to unpack in that one. Um, and they like part of it is you might have noticed some like homophobia sprinkled in, right? There was like a guy in booty shorts doing a little twerking who is supposed to represent one of the climate change activists. Also some misogyny. We got a picture of Greta Thunberg looking confused. We got a picture of AOC gesticulating wildly, right? Those are kind of their brands in the alt-right imaginary, right? Um, and yeah, that is again like, oh, if you are a climate change activist, you're a cuck, right?
Yeah.
So now we're not accusing conservatives of being cucks. Now we're like, oh, liberals are cucks, which I don't know. That feels a little bit different.
Well, no, liberals are cucks
Yeah,
because they are always down for all this stuff.
yeah, we love watching our
Conservative,
country get screwed, right?
right? Conservatives are cucks is like almost worse in the sense that these people shouldn't be cucks. These people
Yeah,
should be on our side, but
we
they're too
elected them to
right.
get
But
hard, so to
they're
speak.
too stupid or weak or liberal, right? Because again, what this has to be brought back to some degree is the fact that in a liberal society, whether you're a conservative in a liberal society or a liberal or a leftist, whatever the case, it's all about compromise. We're all compromising to keep this train going at like 3 or 4 miles an hour, right? But they wanted to go at like 20 miles an hour, and
Yeah.
that's not the way the machinery functions. And
Yeah.
so they disdain that sort of compromise. They hate it,
Yeah.
and so anyone who does it is a cuck. But the libs are just always cucks.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what's good for us. Like you were saying earlier, Maureen, this sort of
we need to be controlled.
right. We're too
Yeah.
stupid. We can't even do 10 minutes of research, right? You heard that song, right? 10 hours,
Yeah.
10 days,
No
10 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, oh, you're stupid, you're gay, you're girls.
You're scared.
What else is in there? You're scared. Yeah, you're always saying that bad stuff is gonna happen. Bad stuff's not gonna happen.
Are we at recess in like 1997? Like
Honestly.
these are like crazy
And-
insults.
But so
Right.
much
No,
of
I
this
think
is like
absolutely right.
so many so much far right and reactionary agitating is just this gaslighting, calling liberals hysterical, which liberals fall for every time. Like,
Right.
especially our mainstream media, they just fall for being called hand wringers or whatever. But it reminds me of, sorry, I won't keep us off for too long, but
No, it's fine.
there was a subreddit that popped up in the COVID years. In the COVID years, we're still in the COVID years.
Sure.
Like around, I don't know when.
In the acute COVID years, yeah.
But it's called Optimists Unite. And it started getting recommended to me, and I was like, oh, this is like a cool idea. But then it became very clear that it's some kind of weird, like, conservative, like low-key conservative opinion laundering, where basically everyone in there is just saying nothing bad is happening. All of you are freaking out all the time. Like, it's not actually about optimism. It's like a way to,
like, the numbers are lower than
people.
like you're gonna be,
Yeah.
You're actually safe.
And so, like, we're seeing this kind of reframing too of ethno-nationalism, of reactionary conservatism as being an optimistic and like forward-thinking sort of mindset, whereas so that's just an interesting shift I've been seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. We do fall for it all the time, right? Which is how we end up elevating these sort of like rationalists, or like, you have people like, I'm going to bring up Steven Pinker again because I am a Pinkerologist, but like, he does this on climate change all the time, where he's like, hey, here's some stats that tell you that we shouldn't be freaking out so much and doing so much. Then we have like when they say we're tough on crime, right? We're like, no, we're not. I'm going to imprison so many people. Like, what are you doing, dude? That's not right. So then we have 2020 COVID cucks, right? Paul Joseph Watson got mad at Boris Johnson because And Paul Joseph Watson used to work at InfoWars. Now he's like his own thing. He's got a terrible YouTube channel. It's awful. He said, "We thought we voted for a person with balls to stand up against the establishment. It turns out we voted for the ultimate cuck. Fuck this fraud, never again." Right? And that's because Johnson was like, "Hey, it's October 2020. I think we might need to do a little bit of restrictions to stop people from getting COVID." And he's like, "No, you fuck." And now it's time to talk about a slimy little bug named Curtis Yarvin, who was writing under the name Mencius Moldbug. I do not want to give him the oxygen, but he has unfortunately been given the nickname court philosopher of the Trump administration and was shouted out by J.D. Vance as an influence. He is part of the Dark Enlightenment, a blogger, a software developer who doesn't think democracy should exist. His software project was funded by guys like Peter Thiel, Mark Andreessen, and he's got coverage around the brain. So, in 2020, after Trump's loss, he wrote that the Democrats stole the election and that actually that's why they deserve to win, because they stole it fair and square, basically. So he said, by fighting and winning the fuckery war, by cranking up the old airs of Tammany one more time, the Democratic Party shows that it is still a thing. It can still bring it. It can still play. It deserves to rule. Soccer players call this being physical. If you remain an election cuck, I offer you this argument for free. It is the best case I can make for your sorry quizzling soul. The case that might makes right is in fact extremely sound. Why not just come out and make it? So you're an election cuck if you think democracy is how you should come up with your leaders.
Right.
So that's good. That's a good topic. And then, 21, 22, a little quiet for cuck talk again because we weren't in an election cycle. And then in the first half of 2023, the only people I'd really seen using it was like James Lindsay, who is not a guy who's like on the bleeding edge of the trends. He's just kind of like someone's weird uncle, but he's worked with like Chris Rufo and Matt Gaetz and like Josh Hawley and stuff. So like he's connected, but he's a little too fringe sometimes, and he talks like a weirdo, and so people don't really like him. But like when Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said that he would restore America as the global example of health and well-being through character and self-discipline, not through pills or syringes, James Lindsay said, "You won't, you'll cuck. You can't take this light as pressure." Which, like, look at us now. we're doing it.
He's showing us.
Yeah. And then when somebody said that, oh, it's so weird that Mark Hamill posted that he was leaving Twitter in 2023, like, we're going to even care. And James Lindsay said, I didn't even know he still did anything except voiceovers and cuck himself in the movie franchise that made him famous. So this is Star Wars. He cucked himself in Star Wars by, having a female protege?
Yeah.
Yeah, by having Rey be in the movie.
And being anti-Jedi, right?
Oh, sure, yeah. They kind of turned against the concept of the Jedi, right? Listen, I saw it in the theaters. I haven't seen it since. You're gonna, I'll take your word for it.
I've always been a Trek girly.
Yeah. Mark Hamill was just in The Wild Robot, which I very much recommend to anybody, whether you have kids or not. You will probably cry. It's really good. The book is really good too. So then in July 2023, which feels like 100 years ago, Meta released Threads, which is kind of like Twitter, but not exactly. And also, like, you can't really say anything political or you'll get in trouble, I think. An X user posted, Elon protects free speech. Zuck protects brand speech, and then showed a screenshot from Threads of Zuckerberg replying with smiley faces to the Wendy's account. And then Elon responded, Zuck is a cuck. And then he said, I propose a literal dick measuring contest, and then put a little emoji of a ruler. And that, I think, propelled cuck back into the headlines, right? So we're in summer 2023, and all of the news people are like, Elon Musk is being very rude. He said cuck. So that's what we got. And like, that's when also Zuckerberg was like, how about you fight me? And then they were going to do like an MMA like cage fight in like Zuck's backyard. I think he had like something set up to practice in, and then Musk kept like waffling, and then Zuckerberg was like, okay, I'm calling it off because you can't commit. And then everybody was like, oh, Musk, you're such a chicken. Or not Musk. They were like, Zuckerberg, you're such a chicken. just like boys doing dumb boy stuff. I don't know. Like, why are we boxing about a tweet? What are we doing? Can we grow up? Again, the schoolyard stuff. And Elon Musk was like, "Oh, I think I need surgery."
It just keeps on.
Yes.
It just keeps on, and it's anything to not talk about something that's important. It's anything to
Just
not
talk about whether you're a cuck or not. Yeah.
Right. The whole world is burning down, right? But we're over here litigating Bill Belichick's girlfriend. We're over here, litigating this and why they use these words. And it's just all nonsense. But it works to their advantage, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah.
Then we have Alex Jones calling you an ignorant cuck if you pay taxes. So that's fun. I thought like the country was our lady and we should be treating her right. Shouldn't we be giving her money? I guess not. If you're Alex Jones, you shouldn't. You should be depriving her of money or depriving the people who are befouling her of money.
Yes.
You can't fund your cuckoldry.
Because they're cucks? Because they're cucks.
Yeah. So in June 2024, the Turning Point USA conference refused entry to Nick Fuentes because he was too extreme for them, I think is what it was. And as he was being sort of like expelled out with his little entourage, this is what he was yelling at security.
This is America. This is not Israel. Nick, you're a cuck for Israel.
I do
You're
know.
a foreign agent. Yeah, you're a foreign agent.
Israel.
So he's accusing Charlie Kirk and the Turning Point USA, which are already like so far right, as being cucks for Israel. And this is where we get into this idea about like white nationalists and their relationship to Jews and their relationship to Israel, right? Where there's this like group of them that like they just don't see why America should be involved in Israel because those are Jewish people and we do not like them and we should not be giving them our money and our support because they are part of the conspiracy, right, to America. So yeah, that's why you get like Fuentes saying and then you have Captive Dreamer, who is a Twitter user that JD Vance is a fan of, who says you have to ask yourself, the people who bend over backwards to shill for Zionism in Israel, would they ever do the same for Europe, for America, for us? If not, why not? I see very boring American stay-at-home dads who cuck on every issue all of a sudden, becoming these violent Zionist nationalists. Why? So he's saying, like, there's cucks, and they like Israel, right? Like they cuck on immigration of brown people. Why are they like Israel? And if you look in the comments, you're going to see a lot of people being like, it's because of the Jewish conspiracy. So right. They World War II consensus, and they specifically talk about brown people having sex with white women being like what the conspiracy is for. And then we're now in like the last couple of weeks, and we've got Nick Fuentes saying Trump cucked by Netanyahu, America cucked by Israel, and then he also talks about it on his speaking platform. So brace yourself, you're about to talk directly to him.
Who's in control here? But that's how it works with our cuck country. That's how it works with our bitch country. Who's in control here? We're paying for it. We give them the money. They rely on us. They tell us no, and we say, hey, agree to disagree.
Okay, yeah. So he's saying like we give them money and then we can't control them, and that makes us cucks, right? And that's the same voice he uses when he's doing his impression of like a bitch wife too, that like controls the husband and the husband is a cuck. So that's fun. I found that there's like a little bit of overlap and maybe even overtake of like simp in place of cuck a lot of the time. And it really shows there, right? Where it's like a guy who is not in control of his wife. He's a simp. Right. Or even a guy who publicly says that he likes his wife, right? And then, okay, brace yourself for Benny Johnson. I think he's the worst one to watch because he's like, there's nothing behind the eyes.
You have to understand the full play here. It's not really about your 401k. Okay? I'm taking a battering just like everybody else. This is about something much larger. If you can destroy the only New World Order state, the only, like, really, you could call it pseudo-functional communist state in the world right now, if you can destroy it and bring it low, and you can cause revolution, or whatever is going to be the result here, then you destroy that future that the World Economic Forum continues to try to foist upon us unwillingly, try to visit upon us in the horrors. If Donald Trump were president at this time, China, the communists in China would have fallen. But instead, we had weak cucks who decided, instead of pushing China, flipping China over, and allowing it to become very similar to like a Japan, like a South Korea.
I really love the idea that like China's a turtle and you can just flip it over. Just
Well, we as a proper nation, a non-cuck nation, would have the masculine virtue to just be able to change anything, just fix anything. We could just flip a 6,000-year-old nation. Simple,
all
no
you
big
gotta
deal.
do is put your fingers under the lid and just bloop, just flip it over, and China's not a communist country anymore. But we have weak cucks. I saw you make the face, Maureen, because like Benny Johnson, if you didn't watch it, you don't really see. He's so proud of himself for having said cucks that he makes this like grimace, like he's playing Katy Perry's Roar in his head after he's done it. He's like, I'm the champion. Like, he's so proud.
He needs to go to therapy. He looks sad. He looks
sad. But I think that therapy is for people with thoughts, and I don't think he would benefit because he does not have any. Yeah, so that was about tariffs, right? He was like, well, Trump is fixing it because of tariffs. He's going to really make China sad. It's like, that's truly not what's going to happen. They're just going to raise the prices. They're going to make the same amount. But, you know, weak cucks. Right now we have JD Vance, who's a fan of the alt-right, and he's also like a trad Catholic guy. And I think things must be really hard for him right now because there's like a big schism in between those two groups, right? Right. Where you've got the sort of Groyper alt-right, formerly alt-right guys who are like also kind of enmeshed in the incel culture. And so for them, like it's gay and cucked to be nice to girls and to say that you like your wife. And like Nick Fuentes called it like a simp culture, right? We're in like girl dad simp hell, wife guy hell, right? And he hates it so much. You've got like these alpha guys who say things like alpha males never post pictures of their wives or girlfriends. It's the first step to becoming a cuck. And you have Andrew Tate, who's like, women cheat on husbands more than they cheat on boyfriends because a woman loses respect for you when you cuck to the marital frame. So like that's the attitude of those like sort of manosphere guys. Whereas the Catholic guys are like, you should get married and have babies and do like suburban white sort of, you know, nuclear family stuff. And that would involve from time to time, like being nice to your wife. and then your Nick Fuentes type is like, no, you cuck. So that's where we're at right now. And I feel so bad for JD Vance, but I also don't feel bad for JD Vance at all because I want him to suffer. So let's pull out a little bit. Oh no, I said pull out.
Yeah. Cuck. Only cucks pull out.
That's big cuck energy, Caitlin.
My white seed will no longer be spread. So let's zoom out a little bit. Let's talk the linguistics, right? We saw a little bit of like, don't cuck, you won't cuck again. We saw some, you're going to cuck for Israel, or you're going to cuck to the marital frame. We saw cuck out a little bit. So like, where was cuck out? Somebody who was like, the political cesspool said Republican leadership cucks out on America First caucus, by which they mean like they didn't let the America First caucus happen. And let's see what else. Oh, cuck yourself. That's a good one. I like that one. So Avi Bitterman a couple weeks ago said, like banning electric lighting because it might compete with the whale oil lantern industry prevalent in a state. This is straight up insane and downright evil. He's referring to bans on lab grown meat. He's like, you shouldn't do that. If you don't want to use superior technology, feel free to caveman cuck yourself. Let the rest of the world advance. So now we're on just like hold yourself back, I guess, or like be a pussy.
Yeah.
So that was a good one, I thought. Okay. So for your paper, you were interested in just like the various ways that cuck could get used, and that you could cuck. What was it? You can just cuck. So let's see, where were some of those? Oh yeah, Paul Joseph Watson did one where he said, beyond celebrate, they actually lobby for your deplatforming, and yet as soon as they get in a spot of bother, you genuflect and cuck like little bitches. This is why you're losers. So yeah, is there anything that we kind of missed on cuck before we talk about your current research?
I don't think so. I'll check my like notes, but I think we've done a really great overview.
Amazing. Sorry it took so long. That's just how it goes.
No, it's just how it is.
So what are you working on right now?
So right now, I am still doing research on like discourses of the far right. I wouldn't call my research alt-right anymore, not because the alt-right, there's all this debate on whether or not the alt-right exists or not. I'm definitely in the camp that the particular articulation of far-right politics called the alt-right doesn't exist in the same way, but it's so thoroughly infiltrated, not just right-wing discourse, but even left-wing political discourse in the United States.
Yeah. So like the trends and the memes and the ideas are still around, and a lot of the figureheads too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of them, I mean, have really prominent roles, or they're kind of behind people with prominent voices. I mean, Musk is the most obvious example of someone who's deeply influenced and feels very Chad-like for engaging with the alt-right as
he's pretty sure he's a Chad.
Look at him.
Oh yeah, so his current Twitter like name is Kekius Maximus, right? Which that's Groyper stuff, right? Like that's your alt-right neo-Nazi kind of reference. This KEK Keck. I don't know if you can like refresh our memories on what that actually is.
So Keck is a stand-in for LOL. It originated in, I think, World of Warcraft. Maybe initially as not as a misspelling. I think it's a sound that some NPCs make, like kek. And
I was gonna say like LOL. Those letters are next to each other on the keyboard. Keck is not a convenient thing to type. So
it's in World of Warcraft you have your alliance and you have whatever the other one is. So the alliance is like your light side, and whatever the other one is your bad side. And Keck is what people on the good side see the bad side saying. But anyway, it was adopted into 4chan far before the alt-right, and then was because the alt-right is so intimately related with 4chan, it got adopted in. But there's so he's clearly referencing 4chan.
Yeah. And they do all kinds of stuff with it. Like I see it associated with the Pepe the Frog meme, and they've got like a flag for Kekistan, like a country that they imagine as like a, I think it's just like a white utopia, right? Kekistan. Which it's funny to give it a Stan ending.
Right.
If it's gonna be the white utopia, but nice. Okay, so you're still looking at these, you're looking under the rocks at the creepy crawlies. And what is you were telling me about disgust, right? You were looking at disgust.
Yes. So much of cuck has to do with the politics of disgust. There's a lot of psychological research that shows that the feeling of disgust has a very, very powerful effect on opinion formation. And that so much of like conservative and reactionary politics center around this idea of repulsion and physical illness.
we have this like connection between physical disgust and moral disgust, right? That like
Yeah.
they often overlap, where if you think something is yucky physically, you might get fooled into thinking that it's yucky, like that it involves some kind of moral failure or evilness.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
so actually, we were talking about Milo Yiannopoulos, and I wanted to read you his little blurb for his new book, because I feel that it is relevant. So he says, it's natural to feel disgust at the perversions of Drag Queen Story Hour, but few people these days have the courage to make a scene. Americans have forgotten how to express healthy moral revulsion. Spooked into silence by whiny social justice warriors, they suppress natural and healthy responses lest they be accused of spreading hate. This is madness. In Make America Hate Again, New York Times bestselling author and lifelong practitioner of virtuous loathing, Milo Yiannopoulos, draws on St. Augustine's doctrine of just war to present a new theory of justified hatred. Prepare to rediscover the pleasure and unity of this unfairly maligned aspect of human nature. So I guess you're going to have to look at him for this. Sorry.
Yep.
I don't know how central he is anymore. Like, can he get an audience?
I don't believe so. Even when I was doing, he's so weird because he was this figurehead in the early kind of public facing stages of the alt-right. But even then, by people who were more central and deeper in the movement, he was already like reviled.
Yeah.
And considered a degenerate. And we've seen that, you talked about it earlier. He at first was like, I'm a racist gay conservative, and that was his big selling point. And then he's like, no, now I'm an ex-gay like Christian convert. And so I don't think there's anyone who takes him seriously, even though I think like it is concerning to see this kind of argumentation, because I do think this is sort of, he's on the front of this war on empathy we're seeing, this very overt attack on the idea of care and community. And it is freaky to me to see him just kind of overtly saying like the pleasure and utility of this unfairly maligned aspect of human nature, because in a way he's right. Like hate does have unifying functions. It's ultimately toxic. It's ultimately causes communities to eat themselves, but hate can be fun. It is fun to be mean and hate on people. And so even if I don't think he will get traction, but I do think that the ideas he's trafficking will continue to gain traction.
I mean, he's not an original thinker. He's never thought an original thought in his life, right? So what he's doing right now is he's taking an idea that's already kind of out there and trying to capitalize on it with this book.
Yeah.
But like, there are people who have proper academic jobs who are pushing the idea of toxic empathy. Or I think it's like Gad Saad is working on a book called Suicidal Empathy, which is like, it's the same idea essentially, which is, caring too much about other people will cause you to sell out your own interests and not take care of the nation that you're supposed to be a steward of, right? And then it's going to end up being the death of you, which feels like pretty in line with the idea of cucking. Like maybe cuck is just too rude for somebody like him, who has a job to keep, but it is still the idea that like, we're letting something happen that isn't good for us, and then we're going to die because of it.
Yeah, exactly.
And also it's yucky. He does a lot of stuff with the yuckiness. Yeah. So like because he'll throw on a wig and pretend to be trans and like keep his beard and stuff and just be like, look how gross I am. Like when I have this wig on, and like use phrases like stunning and brave to like mock trans people. So so yeah, he's definitely like, he's trafficking in the politics of disgust, even if he's not willing to necessarily go as far as Milo, for example. He'll go pretty far though. Ugh. Gross. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's probably a good note to end on, right? Hey, everybody at home, maybe you think something is a little yucky, and it makes your tummy go, ugh, but it does not mean that it is something that you should actually hate. That includes people who are into healthy fetishes, or people whose gender doesn't look the way you expect, or people who are racially different from you. I think you know that, listeners, dear listeners. But be on the lookout, because some people are trying to sell you that idea, even as progressives and liberals, right? It does happen. So I think that is something that we're always trying to encourage our listeners to think about, is just the ways that we're being sold stories like the cuck story, like the suicidal empathy story, like the idea that doing something for the people who live in our society or wish to live in our society is somehow a weakness, when it is not. Well, Maureen, thank you so much for joining us today and for talking cucks, cuckoldry, and BBCs, and not the broadcasting company. I hope you will come back soon to tell us about all the cool stuff you're doing out at Penn State.
Of course.
Awesome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And this has been Half the Answer. Understanding a question is half the answer. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Half the Answer, presented by Liberal Currents. You can find Half the Answer anywhere you get your podcasts. Liberal Currents is an entirely listener and subscriber-funded publication, which includes programs like Half the Answer and Neon Liberalism. So, if you like what you've heard and wish to contribute, you may do so at liberalcurrents.com and through Patreon. And remember, understanding a question is half the answer.